Hello and welcome everyone to DRJ's webinar series. I am Bob Arnold, President here at Disaster Cover Journal. Today's sponsor is Agility Recovery, and our panel today will be discussing the state of business continuity in 2022. Before we get started, I wanted to review a couple housekeeping items. Today's session is being recorded. This recording will be shared with everyone tomorrow via an automated email. Attendees are also in a listen-only mode. If you would like to ask any questions, please use the question panel you'll locate on the right-hand side of your screen. We'll answer as many of these questions as possible at the end of the session. And now back to today's topic on the state of business continuity in 2022. To help welcome our panel, I'd like to now turn it over to our moderator, Greg Tillotson.
Thank you, Bob. Hello and welcome to today's webinar, everybody, the state of business continuity. Today focusing on industry observations and trends for 2022, as Bob said. My name is Greg Tillotson. My day job is as a test declare project manager with Agility Recovery. But today I'll be your moderator and host. We have a very informative webinar set up for you here. I invite you to sit back, relax, and listen and learn. We've got poll questions, we've got panelists, and of course, at the end, as Bob said, we'll have your questions and answers. Now, a little commercial for Agility Recovery before today's webinar. As Bob said, we are sponsoring the webinar for today. Think of Agility as your one-stop shop for business continuity. Agility has over 4,000 customers in various industries and sizes, and we have clients spread across the United States and Canada. Our primary focus is on integrated business continuity solutions. Again, think of Agility as a one-stop shop that helps organizations plan, test, train, alert, and recover all in one. And each year we manage over 1,000 client incidents, helping them recover. Whether it's power, technology, workspace, even restrooms, Agility can respond with a solution to help keep the doors of your business open. Now, got a great panel that's going to be joining us today, and I'd like to welcome them to the webinar. First, let me introduce Tim Matthews. Tim is the Executive Director, Enterprise Resiliency for the Educational Testing Services. He holds a Doctor of Science with emphasis in civil security leadership. Tim also has a Master's in Business Administration, and he's certified in the International Security Management Association. Welcome, Tim.
Thank you.
And joining Tim on the panel today, Catherine Cooper. Catherine is a Senior Business Continuity Analyst for Advocate Aurora Healthcare, a nonprofit health organization with 26 hospitals and over 500 care sites in Wisconsin and Illinois. They currently have 75,000 employees, with 10,000 of those being physicians. Catherine has her MBCP as well as a business management degree, and she's also the co-chair of the Veterans Outreach Program with the DRI. Welcome, Catherine.
Thank you. Glad to be here today.
We are happy to have both of you on the panel. Certainly the new normal was a phrase in 2021 that we heard a lot. The ongoing pandemic forced so many organizations to adjust their day-to-day operations. It's safe to say the pandemic impacted just about all aspects of business continuity and truly shined a light on how businesses manage the critical phases of any crisis, whether it's prepare, respond, recover, or become resilient. For almost the last 2 years, businesses worldwide have been finding ways to maintain productivity among remote workers, address cybersecurity issues, and accommodate the increasingly hybrid work trend. Without unlimited budgets, organizations had to determine who were truly considered essential workers, who needed backup power, and what equipment their remote workers needed to perform their tasks at home. The challenges faced by businesses in 2021 produced renewed calls for operational and organizational resilience through business continuity planning. In fact, as you see on the screen there, the BCG Henderson Institute found that performance during periods of crisis has almost 3 times the impact of performance during periods of stability. So, we know what happened in 2021, but today we're going to talk about what could happen in 2022. But to get there, and to quote Cornel West, you don't move forward without looking at the past. So my first question for our panel, what's the biggest change that you've seen in business continuity in the past 12 to 18 months?
Well, why don't I start it off? First of all, thanks again, and hopefully we can cover a lot of ground in this short period of time, and I do look forward to questions. Some of the biggest changes I think that I've seen in our program, both within our space and some of the peers I work with on a regular basis, is really the change of risk from what we used to think of as sort of a workplace-centric set of risks to more of an employee-centric set of risks in the sense of people working from home, the security issues that come with that, some of the labor-related issues that are coming with that, some of the requirements about mitigation, vaccination, people leaving work, people looking for new jobs. So there's a lot of churn in the workplace, and these folks are now working remotely. So our eyes and ears aren't necessarily on them as closely. So I think that's a big one. I think the other big change is the reemergence of being conscious from a business continuity perspective of not only just your supply chain, but your suppliers. They're in this with us, and they're in some ways experiencing the same thing we all are, or in other ways even more dramatically because we depend on them. So it's something we have to think more about now as we begin to plan for coming out of this, and how are our suppliers and critical stakeholders going to participate in our recoveries.
Catherine, on your side of the fence, what's the biggest change you've seen in business continuity looking back at the past 12, 18 months?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, thank you for having me here today. I appreciate it. I think one of the things that really kind of came to light for everybody was that a business continuity event or a disaster event wasn't necessarily a big bang kind of situation. It's a little bit, and I don't want to say easier because none of this is necessarily easy, but if the building burns down, you know when the event started. If you have a tornado that comes through, you know when the event started. I think for some of the situations that we're dealing with and talking about now, we look at the pandemic, we look at the massive rise in like ransomware and some of those kind of attacks. We read the articles in the paper around ransomware, and they're like, oh, well, when we went back and looked, we found out it had been in our system for the last 12 months, 18 months, 3 years, however long that may have been. So I think we're seeing where we're really having to kind of figure out how to deal with those creeping kind of events. We didn't know the pandemic was going to be what it was. We had a few people that were sick. We didn't know all of a sudden that either we were going to have, a vast majority of our staff impacted, that our customers weren't going to be coming in anymore, or the flip side in healthcare, we had all kinds of customers, and we had this huge influx of patients, and we had to figure out how to staff up for that and deal with that. And it kept going on, and it kept going on. And, I don't think that was how a lot of the planning had been done. The other thing that I would say was that the realization just amongst our general population that went, oh, this is why we were doing those plans. This is what you were talking about, where it finally clicked, and I went, I get it. And I should have written some more stuff down, but I get it. I understand now what it was you had been talking about, in it previously, and why it mattered, and all of the things that we told them it was going to happen. It was like that coin dropped and they got it.
From both your perspective, is the phrase business continuity, from my seat, it seems like it's become a very, I don't want to say buzzword, but it's become very much more important in today's business world, correct?
Oh,
Yeah.
I would agree. Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, if I could jump in. So I've been doing this now for a pretty long time, several decades, and I've seen the oscillation sort of between what we would call ITDR, disaster recovery for technology, and business continuity. And there'd be this pendulum that would shift, and it would typically take, 5-10 years to shift back and forth. And what I saw was prior to the pandemic, prior to COVID, like in 2018, 2019, it was really leaning heavily into the ITDR. Everyone's moving to the cloud. All the buzz and talk was about, let's go to the cloud, and we don't have to think about this anymore. And then we hit this pandemic, and it's now about people and work area recovery, and where are people working, and supply chain. So the IT stuff's still there, but I think the pendulum's shifting again back toward this notion of end-to-end business process. Yeah, there's a technology component, but there's a lot of other things that make your business run. And I think that pendulum shifted. Now, whether it's going to stay on the BC side or it's going to shift again, that will probably happen. But I think right now the focus is on this notion of kind of end-to-end business continuity and adjustments to the overall business process for what we all think will be a new business operating model for our industries.
So if and I'll throw this to both of you, and I want both of you to answer this. If you were to put your crystal ball in front of you and say future state of business continuity, Tim kind of touched upon it there. What do you think it's going to look like?
Well, I'll tell you what I'm starting to see and what I'm hearing more of is that we're moving away from that recovering from a disaster mindset and much more into the how am I going to continue my operations? Doesn't matter what's happening, kind of doesn't matter, I mean, in my step-by-step activities, it matters if my building burnt down or my people aren't available or my technology is down, but it's really, given any set of circumstances, how am I going to continue to providing the services to my customers that I provide to them? And what am I going to need to do to make sure that I can do that? So a little bit of a shift away from that disaster recovery kind of mindset.
So would you say we're living in the disaster, we're living in the pandemic, and we have to adjust, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Tim. What about you?
No, I was going to say, it's interesting. The event occurred. We're in sort of a new operating model during the event. So to some degree, we're really not in business continuity. Well, we're sort of continuing our businesses, but in new ways, and we need to catch up with that. But if I look at the future, what I see is, and I hate to overuse an acronym, but this whole as a service, I really see business continuity as a service happening now, where there's going to be more of a formal agreement between supply chain up and down. So if I rely on key suppliers or I have key customers, we're going to have more formalized expectations between parties that will make it more of a service as opposed to each of us in our sort of world thinking about if our building goes boom, how do we recover it? Now it's going to be more about if together we experience another COVID situation, how are we all going to continue to deliver these critical products and services throughout all of our stakeholders? So I'm really looking at it much more as the business continuity profession being broader, looking at all aspects of this. We used to think about our suppliers in the sense of, do we have enough inventory? But now it's much more than that. It's, our suppliers are in the mix with us. They're experiencing the same problems we are in terms of labor, experiencing the same problems we are in terms of working from home. So it's more about how do we make sure we're both understanding each other's requirements so that we could work well in the sandbox.
I like it.
Can I add just a little onto what
Please.
Tim is saying? Absolutely. And I think there's been a bit of a shift too in an awful lot of what supply chain these days is just in time. I don't have shelves full of product waiting for somebody to need them in the organization. It's, oh, I'm down to my last however many, based upon usage, and I'm going to order it and I'm going to get it in and I'm going to give it to the people who need it. So there's not warehouses full of stuff. So an impact to a supplier, we had one, went into the pandemic a bit where the N95 masks were, you couldn't get them. And, there were all kinds of issues with those. And, we ended up buying a manufacturing company and making our own, so it was a spur of the moment kind of thing. That certainly wasn't, on our radar to do that. But, and I think so some of that thinking out of the box around suppliers and where your opportunities may be is going to be key to dealing with these situations that don't look like they're going away anytime soon.
All right.
If I could just challenge a little bit of that, I think I agree with you. We've been a just-in-time sort of thing. I mean, that's what all of our master's degrees in business and business schools teach us over the last couple of decades. But I think what we've learned here is that's been a risk for a lot of industries. Relying on just-in-time supply chain has broken. So I think you're going to see a move to some inventory accumulation, some hedging there that,
Sure.
yeah, we don't want to get caught again like that. So we will start, buying up in advance and sort of having inventory on hand. And that may be a short-term thing until we sort of forget about this a little bit and get back into a mode of efficiency. But I think in a lot of cases, especially where your supply chain is overseas and you're relying on things that come in from ships or planes, and you've seen the interruptions, companies will start rethinking that.
Okay. All right. Well, let's see what else we're going to throw at you here. All right. Poll question for our audience. Did you update your business continuity plan in 2021? From lessons learned from COVID, did you take the time to adjust your swing, as they say, yes or no? And I know a lot of the clients that I work with, that was one of my biggest things in 2021 was working with clients that were looking at making those adjustments. Let's see how we look here.
Give that just a few more seconds here, Greg, and
Okay.
close it and publish it for you.
All right. Appreciate that.
All right, you should see it.
I do not see it actually, Bob.
All right, we've got 86% that said yes and only 14 no.
All right. 86% of people adjusted their business continuity plan in 2021 that are with us today. 14% no. I'd love to ask them the no section why. What precluded them from adjusting their business continuity plan?
Yeah, Greg, if I could jump in and say that's not surprising to me. I think the word update is broad, right? I mean, there's probably some organizations that this was a wake-up call. They were kind of caught without good plans in place, or they went to their drawer and pulled out their pandemic plan from a decade ago and realized that it was completely and woefully insufficient. So yeah, I would expect most organizations, if not all, to have made some adjustments, either formally to their plans or informally to their operational activities relative to business continuity.
Good. All right. So we're talking about the past year in 2021. Let's focus on some key lessons learned with in respect to maybe clients that you worked with or in your own industry. Catherine, key lessons learned. What three pop off for you right away?
Yep. I would say probably the big one is not everything goes the way you planned it to go. There's always going to be something that happens that, oh, we hadn't thought about that, or gee, we didn't know it was going to go that way, or oh, we talked about all these other things, but that was the thing we really didn't focus too much on. So there's always going to be unknowns that are going to pop up, and you're going to have to deal with with them. I think one of the other things is that people figure things out. I think a lot of times we're trying to put plans together, and we want to do the best that we can with them, but people are pretty darn resilient, at least in our industry, and they'll figure it out. They'll figure out what they got to do and where they have to go. And having that kind of knowledge and experience that you can rely on, is really beneficial. And I guess my third one is that you've got to communicate, and you've got to update your communication. You have to tell people what's going on. And you have to tell them as soon as you can and as often as you can. Because I know sitting in, the EOCs in my company and in our state, that there's kind of always that question of, well, are we over communicating with people? And I think in a disaster kind of situation, you really can't. You've got to get that information out there. And even if you're telling people, you know what, we know something has happened. We don't know what's going on yet, but we're looking at it. And we'll as soon as we know, we'll let you know what's going on and what we're going to do about it. But hang tight. We know we got a situation, and we'll get to you with it. Those I think would be like my top 3 at
Very
this
good.
point.
Very good. So I want to ask you about your second point there. People figure things out. Do you think that because of the pandemic, employees were forced to rise above the norm, where before, I don't want to say they were phoning it, but the pandemic pushed them to a different level of performance and having to be, as you said, resilient, more resilient? Do you feel that happened?
Oh, I think so. And especially in our industry, hospitals annually practice, what do I do if I have to evacuate my patients? What do I do if my building's on fire? How do I, where do I take these people to so that they're safe, I'm safe? And they would practice it annually. When the pandemic happened, it impacted everybody. It impacted everybody longer than anybody possibly thought it was going to. And they needed to step in and say, hey, here's what we can do to deal with this. Here's how we can handle this, because really, we had patient surge plans, but it was, oh, there was a riot and we have 30, 40, 50 casualties that we have to deal with, but then it's done. Or there was a fire, a major car accident, or those kinds of situations that that we practice for. But now all of a sudden it's like, well, we're having patient surge and it's not ending. They just kept coming. So people had to figure out how to deal with it, and what they were going to do to keep themselves safe, keep the patients safe, and really make it be a situation where they were able to continue on.
All right. Tim, same question. The past year, 3 key lessons learned.
Yeah, just to add on to what Catherine said in relationship to communication, I think there's another element to that, which is the empathy required. So, before we would always think about this happened, give you the facts, here's what we're doing about it, we're moving on. But under the blanket of this COVID, there was a lot of fear, a lot of concern, a lot of different political perspectives and opinions that we had to really consider in communications. It wasn't just communicating facts, it was trying to understand the way people were hearing information and making sure we were communicating likely. So I just would add that. I think a couple of the big ones for me were that, early on in the COVID situation in the February, March of 2020, and as we got into the summer, business continuity was elevated. We were really had high visibility in the organization. Everyone was relying on it. But over the year, as it operationalized and really became sort of the new way of working, business continuity is actually sort of fallen off the radar, because people aren't saying, the old days of let's exercise a building collapse and what are we going to do? Well, that's not an option right now with everybody working from home. So trying to get the attention on the traditional stuff has been a lot trickier, I think, because you don't want to be tone deaf either, right? You don't want to be out there beating the drum saying, stop everybody, we have to think about what to do if our building collapses, when no one's even there, no one's even working in the building. So that's happening. And I think, another one is this work from home. I think a lot of people, just as everyone said, as we move applications to the cloud, we don't have to do DR. And we all learned that's not true. I think the other thing that we're learning is as we send everyone home, people said, well, now we don't have to worry about business continuity and work area recovery because everyone's working from home. But I think, in my opinion, that's really exacerbated a problem, right? Because we've gone from having one big location to thousands of small locations. Each employee is effectively their own little office. And each one is different, right? You have some people who are two people in a small studio apartment sharing, everything, to, folks who have 3 homes and they're moving home to home and you don't even know where they're working from day to day. So, and they're moving out of state and you're not sure. There's all sorts of implications with that. So I think, we have to focus on work area recovery. I think it's just how we do it is different. we have to think about each person, especially how critical they are in an organization and what could go wrong in their new working environment and how we can enable them to get back online, whether it's better internet, a generator, or whether it's a place to go locally, a place to go further away for some kind of recovery. So, to me, that was, I heard that a lot, just like I heard before, go to the cloud and we don't have to do DR, and that was proven wrong. I hear people saying, oh, now that everybody's working from home, we don't need our recovery contract anymore. We don't need that anymore. Well, I think we do. I think we just need it a little differently.
Right. How, and this is going to put you on the spot, but I'm curious because I run into this a lot speaking to clients. How do you start with you have 27 different offices now, satellite offices with 27 employees working from home? How or what or where is a good place to start making sure that they are business resilient? Is there a checklist you provide your employees, or what do you suggest?
Well, I think it's unrealistic for most organizations to bolster each one individually. There's legal issues, there's compensation issues, there's kind of fairness issues. There's a lot of things. I would never prescribe for a company to, for instance, go out and put a generator in everyone's house, right? But you will have some people who have a generator and some people who don't. And then how do you deal with that, right? So from my point of view, the way to do it is to look at sort of heat maps of where everyone is now located. So look at your offices. Typically, people have a 50-mile commute, right, in a normal day. So where they would normally be coming in from all around an office, commuting into a central location, now look at how they're scattered geographically, and then start looking at the major risk issues. Are they traversing bridges? Is there a little town that seems to collect, 50 or 60 executives that has some issues with it in terms of it's up against a river and it may flood? So you got to start looking at it, I think, more in these pockets, and then thinking about, well, if we have 50 executives in this little village town that floods a lot, maybe we want to do something for them. And maybe it's as simple as either, make sure you have a way for them to get back to the mothership if the mothership still exists. A lot of companies are getting rid of their real estate, so that may not be an option. Or where's the next best option for them? Is there another town? Is there a mobile recovery solution you could bring to them? Is there a place they could go that we could at least facilitate them and give those instructions in advance? So I think what it's about for me is zip code orientation. Where are people living by zip code? Can I get data about those zip codes? Can I see storms coming? Can I see various traffic anomalies or whatever? And then can I begin to put plans in place to at least assist people in those more spread out geographies? And I think you just have to do that all over. If you have 30 locations around the country, take each one of those and then kind of draw a circle around it and figure out where everybody is. And for one-offs, one person who lives kind of out there, maybe there's not much you can do. But if you find dense pockets, I think you need to treat them as if they're an office environment.
Okay, all right, Catherine, anything to add to that?
No, I think that is a really great way to look at it. And obviously in our industry, we have buildings because we have hospitals. We've eliminated some of our strictly office locations. But for our folks, generally, if you're working from home and your internet goes out, I can drive down the street and go to the nearest clinic, or another 20 miles down the street and find a major hospital that we can work out of. And when I have everything I need, all of my technology, is on my laptop, and I can just pick it up and go somewhere else. And if I have internet connection, I can pretty much get to what I need to have to be able to do my job. I can continue doing my job. But people need to know that too. I think to Tim's point, they need to know, if your internet goes out, don't just sit at home on your phone playing games or whatever. You still need to work, and you need to take those steps to enable yourself to continue to be able to work.
Right. All right. So looking for some advice here to business continuity peers who are joining us in the webinar to be well prepared. What's your advice to people on the webinar to be well prepared with their BC programs? Tim?
Well, I think I'm talking to my peers here, people who do what I do at their organizations. I think I think, one of the things is you're probably feeling a lot of what I mentioned, where you were kind of a hero early on, and now you're kind of not really at the table anymore because the business has figured it out, as Catherine said, and people, figured it out, and now they're back to a normal life. So I think one of the key things is broaden your view, focus on your supply chain, but not from the normal kind of inventory management perspective, but more from these service level agreements between companies. Do we feel comfortable that the suppliers we're using actually understand and have survived through this the way we would expect them to do it? And then I would say, don't throw out your arrangements. A lot of companies had a knee-jerk reaction to sort of say, oh, here's a chance to save money and cancel this contract, or stop using this tool, or downsize this agreement. I wouldn't rush into that. I think you should work with your vendors to tweak them and adjust them. My view is for something like Agility, our sponsor today, with some of the technology recovery solutions they offer. It's real easy to say, well, our building's not going to blow up, so we don't need them to ship in 500 laptops. But hold on a minute. We have people at home working with technology that's now more maybe at risk. A kid spills its bottle of cornflakes or its bowl of cornflakes on your laptop, and now you don't have a computer, right? It's not as easy now for a company to service that, to bring that into the service desk or to ship a new one. So having a vendor like Agility that could ship one-offs, so maybe you look at an agreement and say, instead of shipping 500 to one place, maybe I need a new relationship where I can ship onesies and twosies to various people. I mean, that's just one example. Or what we use is the mobile recovery solution of Agility. And again, that used to be roll it into my parking lot. Well, my parking lot may or may not be the appropriate place, but can we work with you, Agility, to identify different locations to roll these things in based on these densities of staff? So I think it's, don't be so quick to sort of tear up the way you were doing things. Look more at it as an opportunity to rethink it. And then I think the last would just be hone your own skills. Realize that the world's changing and you need to change with it. And if you were in a program that was pretty much mundane and routine and just going along, rethink it. You take this as an opportunity to really re-engage your management in a way that makes sense for where their head is at now. Because again, they're thinking these same things. They're looking at you saying, well, wait a minute, we're not in buildings anymore. We got rid of half of our footprint. So we have everyone working from home. Why do we need to do this? Well, now you have to educate them. Well, there's still other risks out. So I would say, take this time to really reevaluate how you're running your program, and don't be so quick to just look for cost savings.
Is this a good time to redo a risk assessment because the footprint has changed, as you said? Is this really a good time?
Well, yeah, I think that's kind of what I'm saying, without calling it a risk assessment. Yeah. But yeah, definitely, I think it's always a good time. As a matter of fact, as a matter of practice, you should be updating your risk assessment at least annually or upon significant change. And I would say we're all under significant change now. So your BIA, your risk assessment, everything's up for grabs right now. And you should really, go. I know it's sometimes you might not have had it in your plan that, this is the year we're going to do it, but now's the time to really get in front of it again and rethink it.
I would say that in 2021, that was one of the things that I found myself saying quite a lot with clients was, have you done a new risk assessment? Have you done a new BIA? No, we haven't thought about it. What want to do for that for 2023? Well, be a recommendation. Catherine, how about you? Advice for folks on the webinar today?
And you both teed this up just perfectly, because what I was going to say was talk to the people in your organization and listen to what they're telling you. I think people in this profession generally tend to be that, that a little more type A. We're not always real comfortable with silence. And when you ask somebody a question and then you keep on talking, well, you don't give them the opportunity to think about what you just asked them and then really give you a thoughtful answer. And I love tools. I am a big proponent of tools, but sometimes you really need to go, and even if it's face to face like we're talking today, you need to have a conversation with people, because you need to make sure that they understand what it is you're trying to accomplish with your program, what it is you're trying to do, you know, because I can't tell you how many times I've said, I don't care what you put in your plan, not my plan. It's your plan. What do you need in that plan? What's going to matter to you? And if I don't listen to what they're telling me, and I can't tell you how many times I've had conversations. I've worked at Advocate Aurora for the last 3.5 or so years. How many times in just having conversations with people, they would be like, the one I can remember is, oh, you know, and by the way, we have this whole building where we keep, you know, tissue samples so that down the road, if we ever needed to do, you have a whole building that you keep stuff in, and it's climate controlled and it's, you know, monitored, and do we have a plan for what happens, you know, in a tornado, in a flood, in a whatever? You know, I didn't even know that the building existed. So if I wasn't talking to them and listening to what they were saying to me, I would have never known that was even a part of our organization. Found out we had a free clinic, found out we had, you know. So really giving people the opportunity to talk to you about what it is they do and why it is they feel it's important, and what would need to happen if, you know, I don't have my building, to Tim's point, or I don't have the technology I use every day. What if I didn't have email? I mean, if I didn't have email, I'd be dead in the water. I'd be staring at a blank screen going, I don't know what to do, because everything I do out of email. You know, so I think really listening to what people are telling you and talking to you about is so key.
Okay, I would say assessment and listen would be my two takeaways from those two answers.
And I have to say, I love Catherine's view of this as a face-to-face discussion. I think that proves we've operationalized our lives under this new normal, right? Instead of it being virtual, we're now face-to-face.
I like it. Blind spots. Let's talk about what's the biggest mistake or miss that you're seeing companies make in their BC planning, exercising, recovery strategies. What are we missing? What are companies missing right now?
I'll take it. Honestly, I think that operationalizing business continuity is a spot where we just haven't quite gotten to that point yet. And you know, and I'll talk about it from an IT perspective. We do upgrades. You know, we do patching. We do all this work, and sometimes things just happen on it, you know, during the day. Oh, that server just died. Bummer. I had to fail over my application to another server so I could replace that one. Then I failed it back. Wait, that sounds like an exercise. You know, I shut off a server. I failed it over to another one. Everything ran fine. I failed it back. And we don't often have a mechanism to get that information and to utilize it to say, oh, look, you just did a disaster recovery exercise. Or, you know, geez, we had the flu run through our department, and we had to have Susie took over doing Bill's work, and then Jane had to step in and do Mark's stuff. So we did that until they came back, and then, well, gee, wasn't that, what do we do if our people are impacted in a disaster? And look, we have cross training, we have all these things, and we do a lot of this stuff, but we don't have a good way of capturing that information, documenting it, and really looking at, well, that's what you did. Is that what you have in your plan?
Mm-hmm.
And if it's not, maybe we should look at that.
Right. So real life experience comparing to what's on paper and making sure they sync together then.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Tim, from your perspective.
Yeah, I think part of this, I hate to call it mistakes because that implies that we failed or we did something wrong. I think a lot of us in this profession, once this thing was underway, again, that notion of being tone deaf, you know, we didn't want to beat our drum. And to Catherine's point, go back and re-exercise and do walkthroughs and tabletops like we would normally do. So the cadence sort of fell off. but I think to our own detriment. Having foregone those rigid sort of procedures for a year or 18 months, it's hard to restart it, especially under this new context. So I think looking back on it, even though I'll blame myself, I did the same thing. I just felt like it was inappropriate to go out to places and say, hey, look, I understand, half your staff is sick or leaving or being reorganized, or they're working from home and they're struggling. I got to do this. We got to do this exercise. So not doing them, I think, has set us back somewhat. And I think that's, a lesson learned. Well, and to compound that, I think no one thought this would be going on this long. I mean, that's the other thing here. I mean, when we first sent everyone home, I think the general thinking was it was going to be weeks to months. No one thought we'd be talking about this for just about 2 years. And it's something that has just been an ongoing snowballing kind of effect. And the more we defer these hygiene kind of things in our programs, the further behind our programs fall from both rigor and embracement. So I think that would kind of be the biggest miss, I would say, that we've all had. And again, it's no one's fault. No one was derelict in their duties. It was just the nature of the circumstances.
Very good. When it comes to recovery strategy, you said something that really struck me. I remember working the weekend when everything kind of fell apart and taking a lot of alerts and declares and creating cases for clients who needed technology help. And I would put an end date 6 months out. And now I look back at those cases and they're still ongoing. And like I said, we're almost 2 years. So should a client is a miss not addressing the recovery strategies, their ongoing recovery strategy, and updating it because we had Omicron come out. We thought things were going down, and now Omicron came out, and everything shifted. I know for the schools in my area, we're now virtual again. We're not in-person schooling. What's the advice on something like that?
Well, all I would add is, in my view, the event was send everyone home kind of on a dime. We did it. It succeeded. The business continued. The event was over from that point of view. The work from home then became a new way of managing. It really, to me, wasn't a sort of in our wheelhouse as business continuity professionals to manage the ongoing care and feeding of this new work from home paradigm. It was really an HR issue, a legal issue. We were involved to some degree providing advice, but from my view, the event was, it's broken, send everyone home, get it working, up and running. Everyone's 100% working at home, being productive. Mission accomplished. The business continued. Now, the business has been continuing that way for so long that the business has had to evolve and adapt. And I don't necessarily think that's part of that event. I wouldn't say that the event's still going on. I would say maybe there's new events that have occurred as we've discovered new things. But to me, the main event has been completed. Now, you could call reentry, as people are planning for a return to work, you could say this could be another event, right? Because you have to plan for that and do the things you have to do at the workplace to re-accept people, whether it's social distancing or new methods or modes to deal with that. You could sort of compartmentalize that as another event. At some point we're going to say come back, and we have to manage through that. But I think this continuum we're on is really not one long disaster.
Okay.
In my mind. Okay. I may be wrong.
Catherine, anything to add?
No, I think that's an excellent point.
Okay, good. Time for a poll question. Ask our webinar attendees. Do you plan to conduct exercises or test your business continuity plan in 2022? Simple yes or no. Do you plan to do some type of exercise or some type of test for your BC plan in 2022? And I know with Agility, it's we are very proactive in reaching out to all of our clients and making sure that they get on the calendar, whether it's something simple as shipping the equipment so they can test it, or it's arranging a visit to one of our testing sites, or it's exercising a tabletop. we really do encourage that testing. And I'm assuming Tim and Catherine, you're 100% in favor of testing as well.
Oh yeah, let's see the results.
Yeah, let's see what Bob's going to show us here.
Nice.
So, Greg, you can't see it.
cannot.
96 yes, 4% no.
All right.
You know, I think an interesting follow-up question that I would ask if I could to the group is, although you're planning it, what are the obstacles in your way from actually executing on those plans? Because a lot of organizations are, changing their business models, digitizing, downsizing, doing whatever they're doing. So will the priority be there and the budget and funding or whatever it takes to actually pull these together? Will you be able to pull it off? I mean, I think we all intend to resume and get back to testing, but again, it's kind of a new year. It's going to be a new way of thinking. So, hopefully we'll all be able to get that kind of support we need from management to do this.
All right. So, topic of testing. How has testing your strategy adapted over the past few years? Have you seen gaps that are getting uncovered? Are there common gaps out there? Catherine?
I'll take it. I think from an adapting perspective, what I look at is how can we make the testing more like what an actual event would be? Because, the number one rule of testing, don't screw up production. So how do we conduct a test that is what it would be like if there was an event without messing up production, but is like what it would be, So I think that is something where we continue to evolve and we continue to work through that and, try to say, okay, we have to do this because it's a test and we don't want to impact production, but this is more like what it would be like if it was an actual event. And I know one of the challenges that we have, and we have talked about this for several years, and it's an ongoing conversation, is, I've got an RTO of 8 hours for this particular function. When does that clock start? For the business, it probably starts the minute they can't log in anymore. IT doesn't even know they've got a problem yet, potentially. So there's some investigation that needs to be done, and there's some work that needs to happen before we can declare an event. So, asking those hard questions and making sure that we have everybody understanding what that all means. So if we're doing an exercise and I say, oh, but it took us 10 hours to recover that and you needed it in 8, so we've got a gap of 2 hours there. How are we going to deal with that? Well, when did that clock actually start? I know that's one of the bigger challenges that we've had. And the other one is, who do we need? Who should we include in an exercise? I can have engineers fire up a server, move data and an application over, all the green lights are on, everything's blinking, everything is great, successful test. Really? I don't know if the business can even perform their functions. I mean, I know I got a server and application and stuff that's working, but I don't know that the business can actually do the work they need to do. And if I'm only testing one application, how do I know that the 5 other ones that feed in and out of that application actually will work because I've recovered the one that had an impact? So there's some hard questions that have to be asked around how we conduct testing and how we ensure that it really is going to work that way. And very quickly, we had an event that happened at a data center, bunch of stuff went out. Backhoe Bill was at it and he nailed the fiber and stuff failed over to another data center. Well, the way it ended up working out was that the system saw it as being active in both data centers. So they had to go to the impacted data center and actually turn it off. Well, that wasn't what it said in their plan. And I brought it up and I said, hey, that's not what you guys wrote down in your plan. You said it would just automatically all happen and you'd be good. And that wasn't how it actually happened. So talk to me, because we need to update your plan. So making sure that we capture that kind of information when we have the opportunity to do that.
So Tim, how do you recommend organizations do testing and exercises in today's business environment, the way things have changed? Do you have any recommendations?
Well, I think I would go with more smaller tabletop level exercises that are actually aligned to the current way we're working on Teams or Zoom or whatever. People are comfortable with this now, this forum. So, use that, leverage that technology to run mini stand-ups, stand up a small recovery team, walk through their plan in 30 minutes, take some action items and move on. So more frequent little ones like that. And then I would say, I would focus the bigger exercises on your most critical supply chain partners and really, work with them in the spirit of partnership to say, let's go through a joint exercise where we both uncover weaknesses in each other's communications or data pass through or whatever we're doing with each other as we've learned them, to really bolster up our relationship here and maybe come out of it with some new expectations or SLAs or SLA relief, depending on what the circumstances might be. Because I think those are being exposed as really the weak links right now. So those would be the two, I think, strategy changes that I would do. So a lot more frequent little tabletop exercises, but save the big ones for really critical, and I'm talking about just a handful of your most critical suppliers. To Catherine's point, if it's an outsourced IT organization that runs your data center, then run an exercise with them that requires them to do things that you may not have, you just assumed they would do. Really press them to make sure that they can survive the things that are going on around them.
Good. One of the first questions I ask clients when we set up a tabletop is, do you have any third-party vendors? We need them involved. We need to get them involved. So very good. Now the poll question. Let everybody chime in here. What is your company's approach to work from home or working in an office or a central location going forward from this day forward? Are you a hybrid mix of office location and remote? B, 100% of employees are working in an office location full-time now. C, 100% of employees are working remotely, or it's still out there to be determined.
Greg, I apologize. I do not have that poll loaded up into the GoToWebinar. So if everyone wants to answer it, you can use the chat. I'll accumulate the question and the answers for everybody. But sorry about that. That's definitely on me.
All right.
If I could jump in, I bet you that most of the answers are going to be A and D.
I would say D, yes.
Yeah, it's hybrid because that's kind of what we're all doing now to some degree. I mean, I think most organizations have some number of people who are going to work because they have to. They're instrumental to the operation, and then the rest are working from home. So that's sort of a hybrid, and then TBD for the rest.
Yeah, I agree. Catherine, how are they managing that with your company right now? I mean, you have physicians, clearly they can't work from home, although I had a teledoc session the other day. So
that's what I was going to say. Surprisingly, I know, and I'm not going to have these numbers right, so don't quote me on this part, but last year, or not last year, I'm sorry, 2020, we had a goal of 897 televisits from our patients for the year because we wanted to start ramping that up. We ended up with over 1 million.
Wow.
So it was a big ramp up really quickly. Wow. So a lot of people who I think didn't think they could work from home, they can. Fascinating when you learn about the technology that's available, how, somebody can basically hold an instrument up to their ear and the doctor can be remote and look through that instrument and see the inside of somebody's ear. So some of the technology that's out there and that's available is just mind boggling. But we have, your people that are in the hospital have to have people there taking care of them. But I will say people that are in the ICU, we have a lot of remote monitoring of those people. You know, it's almost like a big command center with screens on the walls, and the doctors are sitting in that command center and they're monitoring multiple patients in multiple locations remotely.
That's amazing.
You know, so yeah, I mean, every day I get to go to meetings and just kind of walk out going, wow, I didn't know we did that.
Which leads into our next question. How has the work from anywhere changed the way you think about business continuity? So how does that affect these physicians, or in my case, I had a pharmaceutical advisor the other day on my teledoc visit. How does it affect their business continuity working from home? What has to be considered?
Yeah, and I think what Tim was saying earlier, you know, it isn't, I'm going to provide you your internet connection, or I'm going to provide you your laptop and the camera and the keyboard and, you know, those types of equipment. But it's, what can you do, you know, from any location? And then again, like I said, we're fortunate enough that we have multiple locations. So if you really needed to, you could go to one of our facilities, you know, and be able to work. But when we think about, you know, what if there's a, you know, a cable outage in a certain area, you know, half of a town doesn't have cable service for some reason, and you've got employees working in that area. Well, what are they going to do? Where are they going to go? Where are you telling them to go? How are you keeping track of them? You know, like Tim had mentioned earlier, those are all things you really have to consider. And do you need to? Do you need to know where your people are working from? Does it matter? If they're sitting in, you know, here, it'd be sitting in Milwaukee, sitting in Chicago, do I care?
Right. How about you, Tim?
Well, I don't want to be redundant. I think I covered a lot of this as I talked about the zip code and the sort of the heat mapping. So I know we're sort of running out of time. So unless there was something specific you were looking for there, I think, you know, you could continue the discussion or get into some Q&A.
I have a question here. The business continuity mindset has changed. What can we expect for the future? If you were, again, going to go back to that crystal ball, if you were to say, this is what you can expect, do you have any hard, concrete things that discussions you've been involved with, things that we could pass along?
Well, I would say one thing that a lesson learned for me is some of the initiatives we were working on as an organization anyway, that were just sort of on a slower trajectory, things like call center agents being able to work from home, things like, you know, proctoring, online proctoring for exams as opposed to in-person exams, which is what we do in our business. Things like, you know, computer-based testing as opposed to paper-based. So in every business, there's things that you're doing and you're digitizing. I think the business continuity professional should really understand what's happening in the research pipelines and in their organizations that are organic, and see the opportunities as to how those things could be used in an emergent situation. Because, you know, it surprised me that when we moved to work from home, a lot of these things were pretty smooth because we were doing them already, just in smaller pockets. So luckily we were. I mean, you know, and I think that's the key, is know more about what your organization's working on in terms of forward thinking and strategic initiatives for improving the business in general, and see if there's ways those things can be adapted.
Very good. Catherine, anything to add?
I think making sure as much as you possibly can that business continuity, disaster recovery is inserted into as many processes as exist within your business. You know, get yourself on that change control board, get yourself into the, you know, even if it's budgeting committee, or get yourself onto, you know, the risk review group that your compliance department is doing, you know, and be in them, not only to share from a business continuity perspective, you know, things you would like them to take into consideration, but also to hear about what they're talking about and what they're looking at and what that 5-year, 7-year, 10-year plan is, so that you have an understanding of where is the business going, like Tim was saying, and where does it make sense, you know, to say, wait, you know what? If we did this way instead, or if we did this and this, we would be a more resilient organization. We would be a more resilient company. We wouldn't have to worry about, oh God, how are we going to recover? We would just be able to say, you know what, we're just going to continue to do what we do. We're just going to have to do it maybe, you know, slightly differently than we do on a normal basis until the problem is fixed.
Very good. I can't believe an hour has already gone by. I appreciate it. Tim, Catherine, fantastic to chat with you today. Thank everybody for joining the webinar. You will get a copy of this in your email tomorrow. And Bob, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Wonderful. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, everyone, for your attendance here today. We hope to gather some great information from today's discussion. I know I did. It was a great discussion, guys, and thanks for joining us. I'd like to personally thank Greg, Catherine, and Tim for their time here today, as well as Agility Recovery for sponsoring today's webinar. We will be emailing everyone a link to the recording. You may view that recording as frequently as you wish or share it with your peers. If you have any additional questions, please contact Disaster Recovery Journal. Thank you again, and this now ends today's webinar. Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you. Bye. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.